Hi, it's Timo. Welcome to Norwich City Central.
Hello everybody, Lewis, Norwich City Central. I hope you're all doing well. In today's video we're going to be ranking all 20 Premier League stadiums in the 2019-2020 season. I hope you enjoy the video. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. You know, these ranking videos are always quite opinionated, and your opinion may differ from mine. So I'd love to hear your thoughts down below in the comments section. And before we start the video, I think it's important to define, what makes a good stadium. And for me, the best stadiums have character, and you feel a real emotion when you go to the stadium. So, factors that contribute towards that is the design of the stadium. It needs to have a nice look to it. It needs to be quite big. And, it needs to have a bit of personality about it. The atmosphere as well obviously contribute to a stadium being good. And then smaller factors like the facilities, the view, and if there's pubs around it, I'm sure is a bigger factor for some. But yeah, the best stadiums have character, and you have a real emotion when you go to these stadiums, and factors like the design of the stadium and the atmosphere contribute towards that. I hope you enjoy the video. In 20th place, the worst stadium is West Ham United's, the London Stadium. And for me, it's not a football stadium. There's no soul, and the stadium wasn't designed for a football. If you look at the away end and most of the ground, you're so far away from the stadium, it's absolutely ridiculous. Look, the facilities are impressive, and in terms of sporting venues, it's one of the best in the whole country. It's fantastic facilities, and it's one of the best venues for athletics and for the Olympics. But it's not a football stadium. West Ham fans hate it. Terrible views. The atmosphere is terrible just because it's not built for football. So fantastic sporting venue, brilliant for the athletics, but not a football stadium. In 19th, I've got Bournemouth, the Vitality Stadium. It's a very small stadium. It only holds around 10,000 fans, and let's be honest, it's League One standard. There's lots of grounds which in League One, they're bigger stadiums. So yeah, it's a very small stadium. Quite poor facilities when you compare to most Premier League clubs. And yes, it's just a very poor stadium, and that's why it's in 19th. In 18th place, I've got Watford Vicarage Stadium. Yet again, it's quite a small stadium, only holds around 20,000, so it's one of the more smaller stadiums. And sometimes the Watford fans don't even always fill it out. But yeah, it's got a nice atmosphere pre-match in terms of the flags, but the design of the stadium is in London, and there's nothing really special about the stadium. As I said, I like the pre-match display, flags they have. But yeah, the atmosphere is quite average. It's quite a poor stadium, and it's quite small as well. And when you compare it to a lot of other London stadiums, there's nothing which really gives it that much. It doesn't really stand out compared to some other stadiums. So that's why I've put Watford. In 17th place, I've put Southampton. And now, personally, as you'll find out in this video, I don't particularly like the modern grounds. I think they lack a bit of character. The stadium holds over 30,000, so it's relatively medium size in terms of the Premier League. But I don't particularly like the bowl-shaped stadiums in terms of these modern stadiums. I think they lack. I just don't really like them. That's just my personal opinion. I think they lack character, and as I said, the facilities are quite impressive at Southampton. It is more of a modern stadium, but the stadium doesn't really do it for me. I don't like the design of these modern stadiums, and the atmosphere isn't really the greatest at Southampton. In 16th, I've got Burnley. This is one of the more older stadiums in the Premier League. The stadium Turf Moor was built in 1883. When Norwich fans went there, we had like a cricket ground in terms of the away fans, which was quite nice. It was quite accommodating. But for Burnley, the best stadiums I think have a balance between character and good facilities, and Turf Moor definitely has character with the wooden seats, but it does feel very old, and the facilities aren't great, and also it is quite a small stadium at around 20,000 capacity. Okay atmosphere, it's very old, but it could probably do with a little bit of work. Next up in the list, in 15th place, I've got Leicester, the King Power Stadium. As I said earlier on in the video, I don't like the design of these modern stadiums. It's very similar to Southampton, pretty much identical. They've just got blue seats. It's a bowl-shaped stadium, and yeah, the facilities in these modern stadiums are good. It holds 32,000, so that's a decent size. But yeah, I just don't like the design of the stadiums. I don't think they look anything special, and sometimes Leicester have clappers, which are a no-go for me in terms of the atmosphere. 14th place on my list, I've got Crystal Palace, Selhurst Park. In terms of Crystal Palace, the concourse I quite like. It's quite tight together, and I like they have music in the concourse. But people really don't like the away end at Selhurst Park. Sometimes fans complain about the terrible view as it is quite an old stadium. But the atmosphere can be decent. I think Crystal Palace, earlier on, maybe a few years ago, were known for having one of the best home atmospheres. But that's kind of died down recently, and the atmosphere hasn't particularly been great. I like how it's situated in London. It's got near quite a lot of houses. It holds 25,000 fans, so yeah, it's an okay stadium. It's an old stadium, and yeah, it's okay. Next up on the list, I've got Brighton, the Amex Stadium, built very recently, and it's really impressive to look at. I really love the design of the stadium. It does look fantastic. When you compare it to the likes of Southampton and Leicester, I'd much prefer this design of the stadium. It looks really impressive. For me, what puts Brighton down on the list, it doesn't really have that atmosphere and that. I don't really have that emotion of, I really want to go to Brighton, just personally, in terms of the atmosphere. But a fantastically designed stadium with good facilities, and it's definitely worthy of being a Premier League stadium. I just don't particularly think the atmosphere kind of holds up. Next up on the list, Wolves. As you can see here in the picture, it's a nice looking stadium. It's a decent stadium. I like the stand behind the goal, and yeah, it's a 32 capacity stadium. It's a nice stadium. The atmosphere is normally quite decent at Wolves, although there was a point a few years ago where only half the fans would turn up. But it's a nice atmosphere, decent stadium at just over 30,000 fans. I don't like the away end and how they've situated fans in the away end. It's like this massive, long, small strip, and it feels like the fans aren't really together and they're quite far apart. And I don't really like that. But yeah, it's a nice stadium, Wolves, and they're doing really well. And Wolves fans should be very impressed with how they're doing and how their club's being run at the moment. Next up on the list, Sheffield United, Bramall Lane. Now this is the oldest ground in the Premier League, founded in 1855. Yeah, it's a really old ground, but it's got a lot of character. I like the stand behind the goal, 32,000. It's definitely of Premier League quality. They make a decent atmosphere, and yeah, you don't really want to go to Sheffield United. It's quite a fearsome place. Their fans are quite loud, and yeah, it's a good stadium. I know in a recent ranking video, I think Fogdad put it in 15th place, which sounds quite harsh, but yeah, I guess the facilities in terms of this older stadium aren't great, but it makes up for it in terms of the atmosphere and the character, and it's not a stadium you like to go to. In 10th on this list, I've put my club, Norwich City, and of course I've probably put it quite high, but I'm going to have slight bias towards my club, obviously, and of course Norwich is my favourite stadium. Carrow Road is my favourite stadium, but definitely not the best in terms of quality. But no, Carrow Road, as you can see, it's a nice stadium with 27,000 capacity in a unique location of the country. I like the atmosphere. I think sometimes Carrow Road hasn't particularly had the best atmosphere, but I think the atmosphere's got a lot better in recent seasons. The Barclay looks amazing pre-match, with all the flags. I think it's got one of the best kind of pre-match atmospheres in terms of the design and all the flags. It looks really beautiful. Yeah, the atmosphere is okay. Sometimes not the best, but sometimes can be really good. And yeah, I think what makes Norwich City a fantastic or a really decent Premier League stadium is, as I said, its location. Lots of pubs nearby, quite close to the train station, and mainly because it's in a unique location, it gives the stadium quite a bit of character. And Norwich is not really somewhere a lot of away fans go, so it's in a really interesting part of the country, and that's why I think it elevates on my list. In 9th, I've put Manchester City. It's a stadium which has got a fantastic design. It looks really impressive from the outside, and the facilities are beautiful. I think what happens in my list, though, and the reason why it's probably not in the top 6 or top 5 is what lets it down is the atmosphere. Of course, it's okay on a Champions League night, but Man City don't always fill up the stadium, which can be a bit disappointing. And yeah, I think although the stadium looks very impressive, it lacks a bit of atmosphere. And also, when you consider, as I said about Norwich, they're in a unique part of the country. When you look at Manchester City, there's lots of clubs nearby. You've got Old Trafford, you've got the Merseyside clubs, which aren't too far away. And for me, I don't really have that same emotion and character and the feeling of wanting to go to Man City as I do, let's say, Anfield or Manchester United. In 8th, I've got Everton, Goodison Park. This is an old stadium, founded in 1892, but has a lot of character about it. I like the design of the stadium. It's got a good atmosphere. It feels like a proper stadium. I think a few fans have complained about the away end in terms of not having a great view. But no, Everton's a proper stadium with quite a big capacity. Yeah, really, really good design, and it feels like a proper old school English stadium, and one I really like. In 7th place, next up on the list, what have we got? It's Chelsea. another old stadium built in 1876. I've been Chelsea a couple of times, and the upper tier and the lower tier has a nice view. It's a nice stadium. Atmosphere is okay. It's not particularly the best, but yeah, Stamford Bridge. It's got a bit of history about it. It's got a bit of personality. 40,000 capacity. And I like Chelsea. I like Chelsea's ground. I like its location in London, and yeah, decent atmosphere, really nice design, and one which I think a lot of football fans enjoy going to. Next up on the list, I've got Aston Villa. Villa Park. Wow, what a stadium! Another old stadium founded in 1872 with 42,000 capacity. It's got a great atmosphere, and the whole end behind the goal is absolutely iconic. I went to Aston Villa on the last day of the season when Norwich City won the league title, and it was the best away ground I've been to in terms of the atmosphere. It was absolutely fantastic, and Aston Villa didn't even have much to play for that day. And I know on derby days against Birmingham, the atmosphere is absolutely electric. So it's got one of the better atmospheres in the Premier League, and it's got a really nice design. As I said, the whole end behind the goal is iconic. Really good stadium, a lot of history about it, and yeah, one I really, really like. Next up on the list, in 5th place, I've got Arsenal. Wow, what an absolute stadium this is. In terms of the design, it's absolutely incredible. I think it's one of the best stadiums to look at from the outside. The design is absolutely fantastic, particularly when you look at it at night. It's got one of the best facilities, I think, in the Premier League. So yeah, the facilities and the design, I think, is right up there with one of the best Premier League stadiums. But where it's lacking, similar to Man City, I think, is a little bit of the atmosphere. It's not got quite the same atmosphere as say, some of the other clubs I'm going to talk about on the list. And yeah, when you compare it to Highbury, that kind of you had real emotion when you went to Highbury, and that was such an iconic football stadium. So although the Emirates is incredible in terms of its design, it's fantastic to look at in terms of the atmosphere, and it doesn't quite hold up in terms of its design, and that's why it's 5th on the list. Moving on to 4th, going into the Champions League places now. What have they put in 4th? Newcastle United. What an absolute stadium this is. The design of the stadium is absolutely epic. The tiers go really high up. It almost feels like you're bloody climbing a mountain when you go up there, climbing Ben Nevis. The tiers go really high up. It's got such a unique stadium, a unique design. It's got probably one of the better atmospheres in the league, if not the best atmosphere in the league. I think Newcastle fans are absolutely incredible. The atmosphere they generate, they just love their football at that part of the country. So yes, the design of the stadium is absolutely fantastic. The atmosphere is incredible. Great fans, 52,000 capacity. I know some fans don't particularly like climbing all the way up to Newcastle in terms of the steps, because the away end, you're so high up, you're right in the gods. But I think that adds to what makes the stadium so great. Yeah, I really like Newcastle United Stadium, St James's Park, and let's hope Newcastle fans have a lot of success, because the fan base is absolutely incredible. 3rd on this list is Anfield, home, of course, of Liverpool. It's an iconic football stadium now with 54,000 capacity with the extra stand. Yeah, there'll be question marks about the atmosphere. I do think the atmosphere is a little bit poor. It's not the best atmosphere, although I'm sure on Champions League nights it's incredible. I went to the Anfield on the opening day of the season, Liverpool versus Norwich, and the atmosphere wasn't the best, let's be honest, but I think Anfield is, and why it's so high up on my list, it's an iconic football ground, absolutely iconic. It's one of the first stadiums you think of when you think of English football, and that's why it's so high up. A fantastic design, so much history, so much emotion when you go there with the amount of titles and things Liverpool have won. It's a great stadium, and one which I wanted to tick off the bucket list, and one I'm really happy I did. Fantastic stadium. They love their football there. The atmosphere, maybe not the best always, but yeah, iconic in terms of English football. 2nd on this list, what have I put? We've got Tottenham and we've got Manchester United. 2nd on the list, I've put the Tottenham's new stadium, the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. That's in 2nd place. And for me, as I spoke about earlier, the older grounds tend to have more character, but this is different. Compare West Ham and compare Tottenham. This stadium was built for football, and it has character. I love the stand behind the goal. I think it looks absolutely incredible. It's like the wall similar to Borussia Dortmund. It looks absolutely incredible to look at, and that's what gives it a lot of character. When you compare to teams like Leicester and Southampton, where it's just this kind of empty bowl, that stand looks absolutely incredible. It's huge at a 60,000 capacity, fantastic design. Such an epic stadium in terms of to look at from the outside and then from the inside. As I said, really big stadium, absolutely fantastic. I know a few fans have complained there's no really tube stations nearby, and it does feel a little bit isolated. But no, the new White Hart Lane Stadium is absolutely fantastic. Brilliant design, fantastic atmosphere. It does have character, I feel, and it was built for football, unlike West Ham. I absolutely love it. And top of the list, as I've said, Old Trafford, the home of Manchester United. For me, this is the most iconic stadium in English football, and one of the most iconic football stadiums in the world. It's epic. 75,000 capacity. It's the biggest in the Premier League, and it's huge. The design of the stadium is absolutely epic. The Stretford end behind the goal looks really impressive. When I went to Old Trafford, didn't particularly have the best of atmosphere, although that was on a League Cup game. But I know when Old Trafford gets bouncing, it can be really loud, and of course with 75,000 fans, it's going to. So yeah, fantastic, brilliant design. Normally a good atmosphere, and for me, it's top of the list just because it's an iconic Premier League stadium. Good facilities, fantastic views. I love where the away fans are situated in the corner. So much history around it as well. Consider other stadiums. Might not have that history. I think that's what's the difference between Tottenham and Man United, because although Tottenham has got a fantastic design, maybe doesn't quite have that history. It certainly has character in terms of how it's built, but doesn't quite have that history. Old Trafford has that history. It's an iconic English footballing stadium, and for me, it is the best stadium and one of the best stadiums in the world. So that's my opinion. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. What is the best football stadium? For me, my favourite, of course, is Carrow Road, but in terms of the character and emotion and things like the design and atmosphere, what is the best Premier League stadium? As I've defined, the best stadiums for me have character and emotion, and factors like the design and the atmosphere contribute towards that, and Old Trafford ends up having the best stadium. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below in the comments section. If you are new to Norwich City Central, please subscribe and do leave the video a like. I'll see you later.